Good morning, Professor. I'm Kashmira and I'm a fourth year student at Ahmedabad University. Welcome to Ahmedabad University.
Thank you.
So, to start with, my question is how are pricing trends in the hoteling industry are moving post the pandemic?
Pricing trends in the hoteling industry. Well, I would say generally it's becoming very active because a lot of people have been cooped up for several years, and so there's this all of a sudden sort of a release, and so airlines are getting fully booked, and hotels, of course, also. But hotels continue to have these sort of restrictions on the supply side, and cleaning practices, keeping a certain amount of time between each resident in the room, which really reduces the capacity of these hotels by a lot, and so. Prices are generally going to be kept high as a result because lack of capacity, but at the same time, lots of demand.
Right. So, since you have come here after a long time,
Mhm.
speaking about Ahmedabad University, it is a young university with some trailblazing ideas.
Mhm.
What do you think of the initiatives we have taken here so far?
Excellent initiatives. I think that what they're doing is so refreshing. You see a lot of universities are very big and bureaucratic, and so to see the dynamism here in this university is fantastic. It really is something special. And I speak to a lot of the young faculty. They've grown considerably in terms of all the faculty that they've hired, and so you've got very young and enthusiastic faculty, really trying hard, and and I think being successful too, to a large degree. And so it's really interesting to see. The experimentation, the spirit of experimentation, trying out new things, and many times being very successful in those new initiatives. I really like the idea of being grounded in certain projects and bringing in interdisciplinarity into that and perspectives of all these different disciplines. So often in these large older universities that I've been involved with, we are sort of stuck in our silos, our disciplinary silos, and to see that at least change from the teaching point of view, I think quite an interesting thing for students, and motivates them too. I'm sure, and that sort of enthusiasm just sort of you can feel it in the air when you come here. It's really nice to see.
I'm really glad that you like the environment here at the university. So my next question to you is, how does can you tell us how different the ecosystem here is compared to the international universities you have been associated with?
Yeah, well, a lot of those international universities, like I said, have very traditional programs. You come in with a sort of set courses, and it's sometimes difficult for students, and especially for young people. I think it's young people who still are exploring, what they're interested in, and sometimes don't discover it until later on in life. In the United States, for example, I saw a study a figure, a statistic that just boggled my mind that some 60-something% of undergraduate students changed their major, and so you want to build into your programs the flexibility to allow them to do that. Of course, a young person, at 18 or 17 doesn't know what they want to do for the rest of their lives necessarily, and wants to try out various things. That's just natural, and so we need to have a university system that would give them that flexibility to explore, and what I find is once the student is sort of motivated, they'll work hard, and so it's really a matter of the university allowing the student to find what motivates them, what drives them, and then once they're there, then things take off.
So, being a student, I can tell you that we are made to think out of the box and we are connected to the real world issues. That's the reason we are advancing more in theory.
Yes. Yeah.
So, my next question to you is you learned about the foundation program at a university. So, what is your take on our foundation program and the core of our undergraduate education?
I think getting back into first year and going into this sort of very big problems. So the student is right away told, here we're going to try and solve this major problem. They've read about it in the newspapers and things like
Sure.
that, and so they know. So this is already quite a motivation for them. As opposed to what I've seen in almost all the other universities I've been involved in. They put you in an introductory course with 1,000 other students, and they go over basic principles of, say, economics, and they would go over economic theory. And the student is struggling to understand, why am I learning this?
Right.
And professors often, unfortunately, I find, don't give the student the answer to that, and so the student is left with this impression that, well, I'll learn this in order to pass the exam,
Right.
and so I'll do the slog. But then they'll slog through it like a donkey, and may not necessarily do all that well. But if you start off the bat with, here's a problem, and the student right away knows that this is a serious problem, they're already quite motivated, and then ultimately maybe end up getting to, say, the economic theory that explains some of these phenomena that are going on. Then they're much more motivated to understand that theory. And often there is, with this theory, some real world problem underlying it, or it illuminates some aspect of that real world problem. And so it's just a matter of the order in which you're presenting the material, almost. Start with the problem, motivate the student, then get to the theory part that explains some of these real world phenomena.
Okay. So, after this, my question would be being present on this Indian Republic Day today, could you talk about how the education and the country's progress go hand in hand?
That's an interesting question. And it's one very apropos, because in there had been a theory, for example, in say American sort of relationships with China or something like that if China grows sort of economically, then they'll naturally go towards more of a democratic kind of system or something like that, and that hasn't really worked necessarily. But I do think that, for example, democratic institutions are important, in the sense that it gives the people a voice in the governance, and allows for sort of an outlet, and allows for sort of censors for the leaders as to what people want, and the result is that in some of those more autocratic kind of societies, pressures can build, even though the economy is growing. Like what we saw in China, the economy grew quite a bit, but income inequalities are growing, and some social pressures are building there. And the worry is now that there may be an explosion. Whereas with democratic institutions, there's often more of this kind of flexibility or modification of the system, and as a result of sort of these pressures, there's sort of an outlet for those sort of pressures, and so that we don't have that sudden explosion, and we have sort of an evolution of society, and that hand in hand with sort of a market economy and things like that, which is a more sort of flexible sort of economic system. Leads to, in the long run, I think, better outcomes for everyone, and also a way that we can, to some degree, diminish the inequalities as well. There's that pressure, and can be put on leaders in more of a democratic system. So it's not a perfect system by any means. Everybody has some imperfections in their constitutions, and there's So there has to be some way of modifying also built into the system. But so far it seems to be the one that works the best out of any alternative. Anyway, so far we found.
Okay. Thank you so much, Professor, for your time.